Imagine this, my friend. You're standing on a windswept cliff in the highlands of northern Ethiopia, the air thin and sharp, the sun bleeding gold across jagged mountains that look like the backbone of the world itself. Below you, ancient churches carved straight into red rock hide in the shadows, silent for centuries. And somewhere deep inside one of those stone sanctuaries, a monk in a white turban bends over a goatskin manuscript, copying words that most of the planet has never been allowed to read, words that claim to come directly from the mouth of a resurrected Jesus, words so dangerous, so explosive, that empires and councils tried to bury them forever. You feel that chill on your neck right now? Good, because tonight you and I are going on a journey almost no Western Christian has ever taken. We're going to open the Ethiopian Bible, the oldest, largest, and most complete Bible on earth. And we're going to listen to the voice that still echoes from those 40 forgotten days after the resurrection. Stay close. You're about to hear things that will make the hair on your arms stand up. Let's start at the very beginning, before Rome, before Constantinople, before any of the councils that decided what you and I were allowed to believe. It's the year 327 AD. A teenage boy named Frumentius is shipwrecked on the Red Sea coast of a kingdom the Greeks called Aksum, a kingdom so rich in gold, ivory, and frankincense that Roman historians said its markets made Rome itself look poor. Frumentius and his brother Aedesius are the only survivors. Instead of being sold into slavery, something astonishing happens. The king of Aksum takes these two Syrian Christian boys into his palace, educates them, and eventually makes Frumentius his chief minister. When the old king dies, the queen begs Frumentius to stay and help raise her young son, Izana. And in those quiet palace years, Frumentius does something that will change history forever. He begins to teach the royal family about the carpenter from Nazareth who defeated death. By 333 AD, King Izana converts, mints coins with the cross, and declares Aksum the second officially Christian nation on earth, centuries before England, France, or Germany even heard the name Jesus. While Europe is still sacrificing to pagan gods, while Rome is still feeding Christians to lions, there is already a Christian empire in Africa building massive stone obelisks engraved with the sign of the cross. Now here's where your mind should start to bend a little, because those early missionaries from Syria didn't just bring a few scrolls of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They brought wagon loads of texts that the churches in Antioch and Alexandria were still debating, texts that hadn't yet been voted out of existence. And Aksum, sitting at the crossroads of trade between India, Arabia, and the Mediterranean, became a sponge. Every ship that docked brought new books, new ideas, new revelations. While the Roman Empire is busy collapsing, while libraries are burning, while barbarian tribes are sacking cities, the monks of Aksum are calmly copying everything they can get their hands on. They copy the standard Gospels, yes, but they also copy the Gospel of the Hebrews, the Shepherd of Hermas, the Epistle of Barnabas, the Didache, the Apocalypse of Peter, and most shocking of all, the entire Book of Enoch, a book so wild that later councils will call it dangerous heresy. Fast forward 700 years. It's the 4th and 5th centuries, and the great councils are meeting. Nicaea in 325, Constantinople in 381, Ephesus in 431, Chalcedon in 451. Powerful bishops argue for years about which books are inspired and which ones must be suppressed. Letters fly back and forth across the Mediterranean. Delegates travel from Persia to Spain. But do you know who never gets an invitation? Ethiopia. The Aksumite church is too far away, too hard to reach, and frankly, nobody in Rome thinks they matter that much. So while the Western Church is trimming its Bible down to 66 books for Protestants or 73 for Catholics, the Ethiopian Church just keeps everything. By the time the canon debates are over, The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church has 81 books in its Bible, 35 in the Old Testament and 46 in the New, more than any other Christian tradition on earth. And among those extra books are writings that claim to record the secret teachings Jesus gave his disciples during the 40 days he remained on earth after rising from the tomb, teachings the rest of the world was never meant to hear. Close your eyes with me for a second and picture the scene the way the Ethiopian texts describe it. It's early morning, maybe 30 or 40 days after the resurrection. The disciples are gathered on a mountain somewhere in Galilee, terrified, exhilarated, confused. They've seen Jesus alive, but they still don't fully understand what's happening. And then he appears among them, not as the gentle teacher they once knew, but radiating a kind of authority that makes the air itself feel heavy. His face shines like the sun, his clothes are white like lightning, and when he speaks, the ground trembles. This is not the Jesus of Sunday school paintings. This is the King of the universe unveiling mysteries that have been hidden since the foundation of the world. The book that claims to record these 40 days is called Ingeas Mashafekiden, the Book of the Covenant. And from the very first lines, it hits you like cold water. Jesus doesn't waste time with small talk. He immediately begins warning his disciples about what is going to happen to his message after he leaves. Listen to this, because I want you to hear it exactly as the ancient text records it. Many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and shall deceive many. They will build temples of gold and marble in my name, but my spirit will not dwell in them. They will clothe themselves in fine robes and sit in high seats, but their hearts will be far from me. They will sell my words for silver and trade my blood for power. Tell me that doesn't sound like a direct prophecy of televangelists in private jets and cathedrals that charge admission. Tell me that doesn't sound like our world right now. But Jesus doesn't stop with warnings about corruption. He gets specific, painfully specific. He tells them that brother will betray brother, that parents and children will turn against each other, that love will grow cold, that truth will be called lies, and lies will be called truth. He says there will come a time when people shout his name in the streets, when they wave banners and sing songs, but their hearts are full of violence and greed. And then he says something that should stop every one of us dead in our tracks. Blessed are those who suffer for my sake, not with loud voices and public tears, but in silence, in secret, unknown to the world. For I walk beside the quiet ones, the forgotten ones, the ones who carry my cross without cameras. You feel that? That's the moment the text turns the entire idea of religious success upside down. The heroes of the kingdom are not the mega-church pastors with million-follower Instagram accounts. The heroes are the unknown grandmothers praying in villages nobody can find on a map. The heroes are the prisoners singing hymns in their cells, the refugees clutching a worn-out Bible under a plastic sheet. The real church, according to these ancient Ethiopian writings, has always been invisible to the world. Now I need you to brace yourself, because we're about to go deeper, much deeper. Because Jesus doesn't just warn them about corruption. He takes Peter, his closest disciple, up a high mountain and shows him two visions that will burn themselves into Peter's soul forever. The first vision is the glory prepared for those who endure. Cities of light, rivers of living water, trees whose leaves heal the nations. It's beautiful beyond words, but the second vision, this is the one that makes grown men weep when they read it in the monastery at night. Jesus shows Peter hell, not the cartoon version with red devils and pitchforks. No, this is raw, specific, and merciless. The Ethiopian version of the Apocalypse of Peter is one of the most complete copies in existence, and it describes torment so precise they feel like courtroom sentences. Blasphemers hang by their tongues over eternal flames. Adulterers are suspended by the body parts they sinned with. Those who persecuted the righteous are attacked by the very animals they once abused. Usurers and the greedy are thrown into pits of freezing filth, while demons count their money and laugh. And the ones who twisted justice, the corrupt judges, the bribe-takers, they stand in a lake of fire up to their knees, while worms eat their flesh forever. Peter falls to the ground begging Jesus to have mercy. But Jesus answers, "These chose their fate when they chose darkness over light. I offered them living water and they demanded blood." Why would Jesus show something so horrifying to the man he called the Rock? The Ethiopian text gives the answer. Because the disciples needed to understand what was truly at stake. This wasn't a game. The corruption Jesus warned about wasn't just going to hurt feelings or damage reputations. It was going to send souls into outer darkness where, the text says, the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. The stakes were eternal. And Jesus wanted his followers to feel that weight in their bones before he left them. But here's where the story takes another wild turn that most Christians have never heard. Because some of these Ethiopian texts don't just talk about judgment. They talk about the very structure of reality itself. In certain writings preserved only in Ge'ez, Jesus teaches something that sounds shockingly close to what scholars call Christian Gnosticism. He tells the disciples that the material world you and I are living in right now is not the ultimate creation of the true God. There was a lower creator, a being full of pride and ignorance, who fashioned matter as a kind of prison. The real God, the Father of light, lives far above this shadow world. And every human soul contains a spark of that true divine light trapped inside a body of flesh. Your purpose, Jesus says, is not just to be good or avoid sin. Your purpose is to wake up, to remember who you really are, to find the kingdom that is, and I quote the text directly, within you and outside you, closer than your breath, yet hidden from those who love the darkness. The resurrection in this telling is not just an event that happened to Jesus. It is the blueprint for what must happen to every soul. You must die to the false world and rise into the true one. The body is a garment you will one day lay down. The spirit is the real you that will return home. I know what some of you are thinking right now. This sounds heretical. This sounds like the very teachings the early church fathers condemned. And you're right. Books like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, ideas from Valentinus and Basilides, all of that was declared dangerous and banned. But here's the part that should make you sit bolt upright. The Ethiopian church kept some of those ideas anyway. Not all of them, not the wildest ones, but enough to make theologians lose sleep, because Ethiopia never signed the memos from Rome. They never burned the books. They simply copied them, generation after generation, in candle-lit monasteries where the outside world couldn't reach. Let me take you to one of those monasteries now. Imagine driving hours into the mountains, past villages where donkeys still carry water, until you reach a cliff face that looks impossible to climb. There, carved into solid rock, are the churches of Lalibela, 11 of them, built in the 12th century by King Lalibela, who wanted to create a new Jerusalem in Africa. You walk through narrow tunnels lit only by oil lamps. The air smells of frankincense and old parchment. And in the deepest chamber, behind a curtain that only priests may pass, sits a chained Bible the size of a suitcase, hand-written on goatskin, its pages black with age. That Bible contains the Book of Enoch, a text so explosive that most Christians today have never even heard its name. The Book of Enoch tells the story of 200 angels called the Watchers who rebelled against God, came down to earth and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. How to make weapons, how to perform abortions, how to use cosmetics and jewelry to seduce. These angels mated with human women and produced a race of giants called the Nephilim, who devoured humanity like locusts. God sent the flood to wipe them out, but the spirits of those dead giants became the demons that still torment the earth today. This is the book quoted directly in the New Testament. Jude, verse 14, quotes Enoch by name. Jesus' own generation believed it. The early church fathers like Tertullian called it scripture, but by the 4th century it was too scary, too weird, too hard to control, so it vanished from every Bible in Europe, except one. Ethiopia kept it, and they kept the Book of Jubilees, which rewrites Genesis with a solar calendar and claims the Sabbath was kept in heaven before earth existed. They kept the Ascension of Isaiah, where the prophet is sawn in half by King Manasseh while touring the 7 heavens. They kept 1st and 2nd Maccabean, books about justice and repentance that have no parallel anywhere else. And they kept the Didascalia Apostolorum and the Apostolic Church Order, ancient rule books for how bishops and widows and virgins should behave in the earliest Christian communities. In other words, while the rest of Christendom was busy editing its past, Ethiopia preserved the raw, unfiltered files. Now I want you to think about something for a minute. Every major empire that tried to conquer Ethiopia failed. The Muslims in the 7th century, the Italians in 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, the fascists again in the 1930s, none of them could hold the highlands. Ethiopia is the only African nation never colonized. And many Ethiopians will tell you it's because God made a special promise to protect the land that guards his ark. Yes, the actual Ark of the Covenant. According to the Kebra Nagast, their national epic written in the 13th century, when the Queen of Sheba visited Solomon, she converted to the worship of Yahweh. Solomon got her pregnant, and their son Menelik the Phi was born. When Menelik grew up, he traveled to Jerusalem, and Solomon gave him the ark to take back to Ethiopia for safekeeping. The priests stole it, actually, with angelic help, and replaced it with a fake so Solomon wouldn't notice. To this day, in the city of Aksum, there's a small chapel called the Chapel of the Tablet, where a single guardian monk lives his entire life without ever leaving the compound, because he is guarding what millions of Ethiopians believe is the original Ark containing the 10 Commandments, written by God's own finger. Whether you believe that story literally or not, the symbolism is overwhelming. Ethiopia sees itself as the final fortress of uncorrupted faith, the place where the dangerous truths were hidden until the world was ready to hear them again. And maybe, just maybe, that time is now, because look around you. Jesus' warnings in the Book of the Covenant sound like today's headlines: wars and rumors of wars, nations rising against nations, love growing cold, false prophets deceiving many, people honoring God with their lips while their hearts are far from him, mega churches worth billions while children starve outside their gates, politicians wrapping themselves in scripture to justify hatred, the loudest voices claiming to speak for Jesus while the quiet sufferers disappear. The Ethiopian texts predicted all of it centuries before it happened, and they predicted something else too. They said that in the last days, the true voice of Jesus would rise again from unexpected places, from deserts and mountains, from the children of slaves, from the margins of history. That the Spirit would move where religion could not reach. That the proud would miss it entirely, but the broken would recognize him in the fire of their suffering. My friend, I don't know where you are right now as you listen to this. Maybe you're in a comfortable house with everything you need. Maybe you're in a prison cell with nothing but these words. Maybe you've given up on church a long time ago because it felt fake and empty. But wherever you are, the Ethiopian Bible has a message that was written directly to you across 2,000 years. The kingdom has never been about the loudest preachers or the biggest buildings. It has always been about the spark of God hidden inside the human heart. And that spark cannot be extinguished, Not by councils, not by empires, not by corruption or betrayal or even death itself. The monks in the mountains are still copying those manuscripts by hand, just like they did 1,000 years ago. The guardian of the Ark still prays day and night in his tiny chapel, and somewhere right now, a quiet believer who has never been on television is carrying the real cross in secret. Maybe that believer is you. The terrifying words of Jesus preserved in Ethiopia are not meant to terrify us into submission. They are meant to wake us up from the dream, to remind us that we were never meant to live as slaves in a shadow world, that the resurrection was not just his victory, it was the first fruits of ours. So here's my final question to you, the one the Ethiopian texts leave hanging in the air like incense. When the fire comes, when everything fake is burned away, will you be found holding gold that perishes, or the kind of faith that survives the flames? The monks in the cliffs already know their answer. They've been guarding it for you all this time. And now, my friend, you know too.